Hello YouTube. In the previous video, I was showing you guys on how to make a script within Python. Alright, a script in Python whereby you just it's like a sandwich script, yeah. So in this case, how you do a sandwich script inside Python, whereby you have all these different things going here and there. Finally we got a few responses. In this case, the backdrop, the movie listing and also searching. But now this is a bit messy. Okay, one of the reasons why it's messy is because if you see in the perspective of time complexity and space complexity within programming, okay, it does give out a lot of bad vibes, we call it, okay, bad vibes and all these things. But how do we now make it better? Okay, let's say a feature you're trying to like add in more functionality. For example, now search movie. And the feature maybe is like get by ratings, get by category, and all those things. And it may be easy for you, like you can just add in a new function here, and then you feel like everything's going good. Okay, but that is not the motive here, or that is not the main thing here. So in this case, so we use something called object-oriented programming, even in scripting. Okay, but usually we use OOP within scripting. Okay, if we feel like we're gonna have more functionalities in the feature and we want to be extended to the maximum. Okay, so that is exactly why we use scripting, or why we use object-oriented programming within scripting. Okay, so without further ado, since we have the script here, okay, let's get started with our object-oriented programming. And while we're doing this programming here, I'll be going through a few methodologies. One of it is called unpacking. Okay, unpacking a dictionary, and which is also called as quarks, key value arguments. Okay, so quarks, and then we go into classes and all these things. Okay, it's gonna be fun. All right, so let's get started. First things foremost, we have this previously made script here, right? So in this case, we're gonna use the same folder. We're gonna use the same code folder, but in this case, we're gonna call a new folder here. We're gonna make a new folder called classes. Okay, which is gonna contain all the classes. In this case, we're gonna have one class only, but it's gonna have all the methods or all the definitions within this classes folder. Okay, so I'm now going to make object on that file. Okay, first things foremost, you have to notice, or you have to think is, all right, let's shut it down first. Okay, all you have to do is, in this case, you need to know what is the name that you're going to give it, a naming convention. Okay, the naming convention do matter, and they do play a lot of roles within the usability and all these things, yeah, and readability. Anyways, so click on classes here. So I'm going to create a new file here called imdb.py. Okay, this is an empty file here, which does not have anything, which is expected, yeah. So in this case, first things foremost, to have a class, okay, first things foremost, if you have to use different programming languages, each different languages have different way of declaring a class. But in Python, it's called as class. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to put in a capital letter IMDb. Okay, and I'm going to do a double dot here. Okay, so in this case, if I have something like this, and if I type in something within it, not SS and all these weird characters, but then something real, okay, like object, which means this class is going to be inheriting the object property or object parameter, yeah. So in this case, it says here, the base class of the class hierarchy, which means it's going to use the object. Okay, therefore, IMDb is going to be inheriting the object instance itself, which object is a part of Python default, yeah. So that is why we do that. But in this case, we do not need any extending. Okay, so when we create a class, okay, when we create a class in Python, there'll be a few things that you need to by default know. Okay, first things foremost is initializer. Okay, initializer is called as init. Okay, init, and init will accept, it must always have the instance of the class, which is called as self. In other programming languages, sometimes it can be called this. Okay, in PHP is called as this. Okay, at some places it's called as CLS. It's the same. Okay, but to keep simple, things simple, just keep it as self. All right. And since this has a passive, which means it's going to return none, which is fine. You guys can keep the same string typing. Init should not return anything. All right, unless you want it to return something. So let's keep it there first. And if you noticed on this previous script here, we do have a few variables that is set. API key, API URL, pages. Although when we try to get our object-oriented stuff going on here, okay, we may or we may not need to declare the pages explicitly. But what we could do probably is like declare it. I think we have to declare it explicitly, but in this case, if you want to declare it dynamically, you just add it a part of here. All right. So in this case, so let's do our first function. Okay, I'm just calling. I'm going to give you a name here. I'm going to say get movie listing. Okay, first function is called as get underscore movies. Okay, get underscore movies. And I'm going to pass in, you must always pass in yourself. Okay, and then you just have the double dot, which means you're now closing up the input parameters for the function. Although self cannot be injected from anywhere outside of this class. Okay, which means that self is always declaring, always referring to the main class instance here. All right, so get movies. So let's see here. Within our get movies, this is going to return a list. Okay, it's going to return a list. For now, let's keep it as an empty list. Okay, either you can do an empty array kind of thing here, the symbols, or you can type in list. Okay, which is the same as that. Okay. All right. So we have the movie listing here, but we need to declare the API key and API URL, so it's a bit easier in the future, yeah, when we try to create things. All right. So here, when we want to declare a a privately accessed variable within the class itself, it's like a class declaration, which has variables like secrets or something like that. Okay, we usually do it in the initializer. Okay, initializer has, in different languages we have this dot parameter equals to something. Okay, so which means we are now declaring, or we're now assigning this value is this empty string, to this parameter. Then that comes under the denotion or something like that comes in by specified or explicitly specified, in this case as this dot parameter. All right, so we're going to do the same thing, whereby this is self in Python. Self dot API underscore key equals to empty string for now. Okay, when we do the same thing for API URL, okay, so we're going to put self dot API URL equals to empty string, and we can remove this pass. It's fine, it will not cause any errors. Okay, and lastly we have pages. This is the page number, yeah. So in this case we can say self dot pages. Okay, let's give it as 5, which is just 5 pages. All right, so that so now we have declared all our variables here that's going to be used within the entire class. So we can declare here and there. Why don't we try now populating the data in the credentials, the API URL and all the things that's already there. Okay, so which means now it looks neat. Now our entire A section is completely done and dusted. Okay, and now if you go down here to the get movies, we have an initial variable to call our results. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Okay, for now I can just remove it here. Results equals to empty list. Okay, and now we're going to now iterate through each and every properties that is there within the what we call it, within the pages here, pages within that is declared here. Okay, so first one is for index in range. Okay, which means it's going to iterate 5 times. That's because it's an integer. Okay, I'm just going to pass in call self dot pages. Okay, which is 5. So now if I scroll down here, now is the time where we're going to do the queries here. So in this case, we're going to have 1 also. So 1, 5. Okay, so that's because there's no page 0, there's page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, relational terms. And now we have this. By default, you may think like, I'm going to just copy paste this. Then it just magically happen. No, I want to show you a better way of how you can implement this line here. Okay, because requests as a package has a lot of different things. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys one of it that is within request. But before we do that, make sure you guys import requests. Okay, request is imported. So I'm going to type in request equals to request dot get. Okay, so now we're going to just copy this one here until the point of this. Okay, ensure this is changed. Yeah, so self dot API underscore URL. Okay, discover mode. And now if you notice, we don't have things like this. But you may ask why, how? Okay, so because I'm not going to add that to this line here, but there is a key within request where it's called as params. It will automatically URL encode every single thing that is within the params dictionary into the question mark API underscore key equals the value and then page and all these things. which we will see it later on while we're trying to do. So the first key that it needs to append or encode is API key. Okay, so it's going to be self.api key. Second one is page. So in this case, page is that to index, yeah, which means now we have the pages and the API key linked properly. Okay, so which means we are now done with this first request here. Now error handling. Whenever we have a script that does something, because a script is not monitored by people, right? Like a programmer or a maintainer or something. Okay, it just runs, you just deploy it once and then you just hope it runs. If it falls or stalls somewhere, then it's you may just blame it on the next person. Okay, but that is not the case. You just always have to error handle this. Okay, so if request dot status code is not equals to 200, which means if it's not errors 200, which means either error 400, 500, or something like that, please do something. First, I'm going to have to print. Okay. Second of all, I'm just going to return an empty list because our function has a strict type here, which means it always expects a list. Okay. So here is the error handlers. So in this case, we can just have error. I mean, we just call it as get movies. Okay, and then the error code we just put it down here, which is request.content. Okay, and if you notice, I mean, if you check the error contents here, if I go to that URL, where is it? That discover movie equals not equals to, but question mark API underscore key equals to something. Okay, we have this here. Okay, we have this and all these things. But at the same time, if I do movie, okay, then if I do 550, okay, I get this. But if I, let's say I put in something that's not existing, like I just put a random value here, and it just says this, the resource you requested could not be found. And that will actually be returned via the request.content. Okay, and this is by default when it returns it without, I mean, if it's directly from the web, okay, it will be as byte content, which I will show you guys in a while, but I'm not going to do anything here. It will return as a byte content. But to make it easily readable by humans, us programmers, while we debugging things, okay, you may have to convert it a little bit, but that conversion is not a big problem. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to leave it as it is for now. Okay, here below this here is we have results equals to results plus JSON key result, which is the same thing I'm going to put in results plus request JSON, and then we have the results key, okay, which is what it's going to do magic with. Okay, then finally, if you notice here, we have something like here for result and results. This is an additional unneeded, okay, unneeded loop, okay, because it may increase your RAM consumption and yeah, and CPU. Okay, so RAM consumption and CPU. So it's very, very dangerous. Okay, so in this case, how do we do it effectively is, here's where I'm going to show you guys something called unpacking. Okay, unpacking is a thing that is there within I mean within Python is a built-in function or built-in operator within it. So we're going to make use of Mr. Unpack. So return. Okay, by default we know, by default we know that the data that is stored here within this list and all of this is actually a dictionary. Yeah, so actually a dictionary. So we're going to take the same approach. So I'm going to open up an empty dictionary here. So I'm going to say for result in results, which means it's now iterating the whatever dictionary that's inside there, and then it's adding back inside here. Okay, so to unpack something, here I'm going to give you an example. Okay, so let's say the data is around like this, that, and then I'm going to say ID equals to 1, then name equals to name and all these things. Okay, by default, if you try to iterate a dictionary or a loop within a dictionary, let's say this is a list which is array. The array contains dictionaries and it can contain as many as it wants later on as well. Okay, which different IDs. All right, so now we have this data here, which is the dictionary within an array, and they can have as many dictionary, then you do not need to care about how much is inside. You just need to handle how it's handled. Okay, you just need to architect that. So now we have our dictionary here. Since we are iterating whatever dictionaries that is inside this list with our for result in results. So every single result is literally going to be a dictionary. Okay, and if I put the dictionary inside here and I put result here, it's going to be an error. Why? Because you're trying to literally pack in a dictionary within a dictionary. So it's literally, if the wrong way is going to be like this. Okay, that, and then you have your values inside here. Okay, and this is going to be a wrong thing. This is a dictionary, and this is the dictionary inside, which you are already violating the standard procedure of JSON. Okay, so do not do that way. Okay, the correct way will be the same one as you envisioned. Okay, the correct way will be literally like this. That is the correct way. Okay, so but now, as I told you guys, I mean, how do we achieve that? Although it may be normal for you to just put that in and then you feel like it's correct. I mean, it is correct. But if you check the requirements here, we are patching a value. Okay, we are literally patching a value. So in this case, to achieve that, we open a dictionary here. We use something called this double asterisk. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to put in result, which means this thing, when we have two asterisks in front of a variable, okay, which is being iterated here, is literally going to pluck out each and every keys and values that is inside the dictionary, except the one outside the curly braces. So each and every value will literally be a standalone value within that. So it's literally going to be mapping that to the same thing. And in the end, we'll get the correct output, regardless of having this funny thing here and then results, all these things. Okay, this is called as unpacking. In other words, it's also called as key value arguments. So a dictionary or a JSON has something called key and value. Okay, so key and value, that is what it's doing. It's trying to unplug, or it's trying to unpack whatever data that is inside the JSON, and therefore it's going to return you in the proper standard. Okay, so now we have our results like this. So now we can do the operation of our changing here. So in this case, just comma that result backdrop underscore path. Okay, equals to, we can just copy this here. All right, and we can then paste that. Okay, or we can just call it as backdrop path. Okay, and then you paste it there, which means this is something called as map. If you have used map in Python, or if you have used map in different languages like Angular, even PHP has some, okay, then Node.js, Java, and all these things, or even Golang, all right. So in this case, if you want to like update a value within a dictionary, although some people might say like just use things like this, result backdrop and then just iterate through. It's a bad thing. It's a bad practice. Do not try that. Why don't you use something innovative? So in this case, you unpack the values. Then while it's unpacking the values, all you have to do is simply inject your new value and in the new key or the same key that you're trying to update, then with the new value, and you're done. That is all it needs. Okay, and now which means that right after we've done all of this is all. Okay, which means the code is now standardized and it looks a bit neater, and therefore we have completed the get always function. All right, so I'm going to copy the same thing here. So I'm going to put in here. So I'm going to say def search movie. I'm going to say movie ID. Ensure you have self movie ID str. Okay, then I'm going to say it's a dictionary. Okay, then I'm going to return an empty dictionary for now. All right, so now this function is literally the same as that, or just that it has self here because it's a part of the class. But in the future, while we go through this Python for beginner course, okay, I will show you guys on what or how you can have static functions within your class, whereby you don't need to pass self. Okay, so again, request. Okay, so request dot get. Okay, and I'm gonna copy that thing there. Okay, paste that in. Ensure you have everything correct. Self.api key. Okay, params. Okay, I'm going to call it as API underscore key once again. And then self.api key. Okay, So now validation here. So if it finds out that if the request status code is not equal to 200, okay, all you have to do is the same thing that happened here. Okay, just do that. But just remember to change the values. In this case, not a list, but it's the dictionary. Okay, so I'm going to say search movie. Okay, so that now is the point where we do the things that we do here. Okay, so with this, you can also do the same thing, unpacking. Okay, so now we are returning an empty dictionary here. All you can do is that result, request, request, JSON. Okay, which means it's now unpacking the response that is returned by the API. Okay, which means it's unpacking that to that. Then all you have to do is add in the backdrop again. But in this case, you just have to change this. Then you have your comma here. Okay, which means now this function is also ready. You see that how easy it is. Okay, in the end, if you want to have the standard practices, as I told you guys, a class should have a few functions. One of it is init. Second one it could have is a wrapper. Okay, although wrapper is not seen or could not be seen every single place that you see it, but in this case, you can still make use of a wrapper. Okay, so I'm going to call it imdb. Okay, so you can have a wrapper, so which means you know that it's wrapper, or whenever you try to execute, or whenever you try to print a wrapper, which we will go through this when we go to object-oriented programming in depth. Okay, so in this case, we will see this guy often if you try to print something. Okay, and when we go to Flask and all these things, it will make more sense. Just stay tuned. Okay, so now we have all these functions void up. It's time for us to test it out. Okay, so let's inside here we have this old script and we have the new script. Okay, so within this script file here, I'm going to remove everything. Okay, so all I'm going to do is from classes import an imdb, import imdb. Okay, but if you feel like this is a bit but it doesn't look nice, you can have another file here called init py. So all you have to do is from imdb import imdb. Okay, close that file. Then, so this is what you do. From classes import imdb, which means from classes will automatically refer to the init file init. Okay, and import is the one that is being exposed from here. Okay, so that is how you can make it nicer and prettier. Okay, so let's initially call the class only. Okay, let's see if this works. So Python 3, make sure you set virtual environment. Okay, script.py. It did come up. This is the wrapper method that I showed you guys. Okay, the wrapper method called imdb. I can change this wrapper method here. I can just say like, the wrapper is going to return me the API underscore URL. I mean, not the key, but API underscore URL. So it's going to be wrapped with a string. Or we can just say equals that, then format self.api URL. Okay, if I run that script, now I can see that imdb API underscore URL is equals to API URL. Okay, and this is how we use wrapper. Okay, this is how you can make use of it. So now we have that function initialized. Okay, let's get the movie listing. Get movies. Okay, then let's run this. Hopefully there's no errors, but let's see. There you go. We now are able to get that details. And if you notice, the backdrop path is now changed to the API URL, I mean the image URL. Okay, so this means that it is actually working, that unpacking and all that things that we did. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna get a movie search history or the search movie thing. So all I'm gonna do is search movie. It requires the ID, which we're gonna say 550. Okay, to keep it simple. Now run that, and I already got the data for that, which means that this is a part of the 550 ID movie. Let's see if you can see 550 here. It's a bit too small. Interesting. There you go, ID 550. Okay, therefore it is correct. All right, let's say if I put something different, like a different ID, just spam it in, and then run this. And then it says now this, okay, backdrop path not found, which means that the validation for the request status code is not working. Okay, so if request status code, we can print out the status code and see ourselves. So print request dot status code. Okay, it did still give me a 200, even though the request and all these things are wrong, or not wrong, maybe. I type in something different. There you go. It's a status code 400. I'm not sure why. It's just that sometimes they don't handle it from the API level. And it says this, search movie B is called byte. Success, this and that. And this is not a valid JSON string, by the way. Although it looks like JSON, but it's not. It is actually a byte string. So to convert it to a proper JSON output, okay, this is where we're going to do the same what I told you just now to properly change it. So import JSON, okay, which is a built-in content, main built-in thing. Okay, so this is the get movies. If the get movies fail, I want to get the JSON output from it. So all I have to do is JSON dot loads, okay, and then I just pass in the request content, which means it will convert the byte to JSON. All right, and even the same thing here. So I'm going to do JSON loads, and I'm going to pass that in, and let's try it out. Now it is a valid JSON. If you notice it here, okay, which is success, false, a status code, and all these things. This is a valid JSON. But if I do a type, let's see if that works out. Okay, initially we keep that there. Let's do a type. Okay, request content, and then let's do a type of this as well. Type. Okay, let's do a search. Initially, if you see, the type requested content is actually giving me bytes, whereby after I do JSON loads, I get a dictionary. All right, and this is how it actually works out perfectly and splendidly. Okay, so in this case, uh, okay, so in this case, I'm going to put that in there, and then just says this. Perfect. Okay, and this is how you literally start up with the second part of the scripting, whereby you use object oriented, and you can go as much as you want, and there's a lot of methods that you can use. One of it that I showed you guys is unpacking. Okay, unpacking usually works with dictionaries, whereby if you see something like this, if you do something like, which means it's a list basically, okay, the list is converted to key value arguments as well. Okay, this is called as args and quarks. You can check args and quarks on documentation that's online there. Okay, you can just search on difference between args and quarks. Let's spell it correctly. Okay, so quark stands for keyword arguments, and then the difference that it uses keywords and returns the values in the form of a dictionary. Okay, whereby args is a bit opposite of that. Okay, so that's pretty much it. All right, so in this case, so this is how you literally start up with, I understand this video took a while, but then this is a lot of things that you guys have to understand before we get started. And throughout the entire course of this Python for beginners, I'll be going through a few slides as well, okay, that are prepared for this entire course, which will cover you the basic fundamentals. Then we can go back to scripting, and then I'll bring you guys towards Flask, okay, where you can create APIs and all these things. All right, because that is the motive, right? Most of us are envisioning to become a API or DevOps guy or a developer, want to do some cool stuff. I mean, why don't we? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, I hope you guys have an awesome day. Okay, if you guys are new, like, share, subscribe, and let your family members know, let your friends, or let your colleagues know. Okay, that there is a new guy starting our YouTube series and all these things. And yeah, and this is me, Raven. Okay, my alias is Inspector Gadget, and you can find me on GitHub here. So github.com/InspectorGadget. Okay, and this is my repository. I mean, this is my GitHub things. Okay, that's going on. And yeah, this is me. And then as we go on in the future, I'll be introducing you guys with Amazon AWS when we come to a point where we are trying to interact or integrate our APIs to make it live so people can use it, like our family and friends. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys have an awesome day and peace out.